shapes. So my next thing would be is to block in the shadow shape. When I'm blocking in, I'm using that opportunity to double check. Now I'm making my shadow nice and solid, a little darker than I see it, because I want to leave the space for bringing reflective light into the shadow. And I want to bring it only to the level that suits my idea. It's something that is very important. I'm not here to copy the photograph. I'm here to interpret and make painting that hopefully would be derivative of this photograph and not a repetition, not a replica. I'm using photography and I'm combining the information about the shapes and spaces to create my own interpretation of the painting. Now, I might totally fail at that, or I might win, but I don't mind failing. And I think this is something that all of us as a painters need to learn, is we just playing. Don't take yourself too seriously. I rather have small victories than get myself so upset that I can't do it and quit. I think a lot of people don't learn painting because they quit too early. It's very possible. It's very logical. So once you understand the logic, it's all about practice. Learning is not just by taking classes, webinars, or going to workshops. Learning happens in the quiet space of your studio, holding brush with your own hand and not being led by teacher or relying on somebody giving you the answers. It's all about getting skilled at manipulation of the paint, making the paint to do what you need at the moment, and also developing confidence that you can walk into trouble and that's okay, but you will find the way out of them by yourself. So what I want you to take out of this demonstration is more how I think rather than how I do it. How you design shadow shapes, it make the shape of the cheekbone. They turn into the muzzle. They come around. They create the protrusion of the chin. So those little turns are not just wiggly wiggles. They are there describing the form. And that's why it's important to lead up your model right, so they describe the form well. Already I'm thinking about the edges. I can do something like this, which makes that edge softer here and maybe just a little bit more harder here, but not too much. Considering your edges from the start, right away, I'm making like small baby steps there, but then I'm coming back and maybe creating a little bit more push of the value at the core. But this will need to be a soft edge after all. At my shadow shape, the next thing I'm gonna get my darkest dark, which is framing of the hair. So I get to rethink again the shape of the face, placing the anchors of the extremes. This is the darkest value in this portrait that everything will be compared to. So, and then I'm just gonna light this value with violet gray and still put a relatively dark value here. The same paint gray down. Is there a question?
In general, what brushes do you use?
What brushes I have? It's a big secret because they're magic brushes. No, I'm kidding. You need to find the brushes that work for you. I have all kinds of brushes. And the more I'm learning to paint, the more I'm able to use bad brushes. And I love them because they don't define edges so clearly as some of my nice brushes. But in the beginning, I like to use more brushes that are well shaped. I like Rosemary and Company because they have so far a good quality brush and less expensive. Ivory is a synthetic brush and Classic is a natural hair brush. So I like using both. Next thing, I'm gonna take my fan brush and I'm just gonna get a little bit of violet gray and add a little bit more coolness to it. And I'm just gonna do this. And I'll tell you why I like using the fan brush here. A, it gets me there much faster. But also there is already a painterly quality. There are leaving the gaps, some of my ground zero coming through it, my undertone. So there is a play of warm and cool. And I like that. And I used the same volume. And now I can go in and maybe put a little bit of a design of division for the shadow shape or a little gap. But again, you can put that in and something like that. So that's already just gives you the beginning of it. What I want you to think about that right now, you want the painting to grow organically. So it's not like we painting the face, then we painting the background, and then we painting the rest of whatever else is left, the costume. But you're already thinking, how does this marks gonna help the viewer come around? Is it a good idea to come with the similar color and maybe use for highlights of the corner of his hair? Or maybe I'll put a little more highlights here to soften the edge here. Or I will use some of this coolness in design of the side planes of the face. Making this edge a little bit more sharper will get you into this line more. Designing this line as a shapes rather than linear and having a gap between the line, making the viewer more involved. They will connect the dots between the two. Notice the difference if I do connect them. That is much faster and more boring than something like this. So that is already thinking design. Actually, that solution I also like. It's maybe darkening this, maybe darkening some of this little shape here to create slower movement into the light. So this is all part of the design. The next thing I need to decide, what am I doing for the background? Of course, the reference is giving me green, and it's a very intense, saturated green. I think in the beginning, I would keep that a little more quieter if I am going to go to green. I need to make some sort of the decision. Color matters for me because I'm going to reuse the background color into the skin tone.
Question, could you please mention the colors you use for the shadows?
Shadows, I used red ochre and I modified it with yellow ochre with a little bit of blue. Usually use more of a cadmiums like raw umber, cadmium red light, and cadmium yellow deep. Always try new things. Don't get yourself into formulas. So you can find this shadow in so many variations of different painting. What matters that it needs to be warm and it needs to be solid and dark enough to hold the light. If it's too light, you will need to go much lighter with the light to make enough contrast. Let's take a little bit of viridian green and yellow ochre, add a little bit of yellow. I'm gonna use my Gamsol and my fan brush. And for the quickness and for the quality of looseness, I'm gonna just apply that. So why do I need background at this stage? Because we are trying to paint the whole painting together. We are building a relationship. The background is an important element of the relationship. And it's also truly my eraser. So if I need to correct the shape or I need to correct the edge, I will need this area to be wet. I made the background more desaturated to sit back into the space. And then in some areas where I would want it to maybe contrast the shape, I can always either darken it or I grab the little red with my brush. That's okay. A new idea. We just have to roll with it. At this point, if this was a theater, my stage is set for the main character to finally step into it. And the main character of my painting is not really a face, it's a light falling on the face, the structure of the face. I set up my shadow shapes, I set up my darkest dark, my background, including his clothing, is a part of the background. I'm ready to paint the light falling on the face. Taking the last look on my abstract shapes, and I can see how this is a little bit more elongated. So to make it more rounded, I'm gonna take some of my hairline and push it lower. That's better. Okay, lower that, change this angle. So now when I have my background, I start seeing a little bit more. I do like this edge to be a little bit sharper. Not too sharp, so it has a nice starting edge to separate. Because this is a sharper edge, this edge will be softer. The next edge will be sharper. The next edge could be softer here. So we are solving our edge problem not by observing what the reference is telling us, but by creating change of edges. If you start hard edge, the next edge is soft. And that is the sequences that you creating. So let's start painting